welcome everyone. Kalispera sas. Welcome. Good evening. Thank you all so much for joining us for our third and final part of our wonderful new series, Meet Me on the Corner of Broome and Allen, the story of Greek Jews on the Lower East Side of New York, for part 3. We're so honored and privileged to have you all here with us tonight. Just a friendly reminder, this is a part of our partnership between the Sephardic Jewish Brotherhood of America and Kehila, Kedosha, Janina Synagogue and Museum, the wonderful Greek Jewish and only Greek Jewish Romaniote Synagogue on the Western Hemisphere. In fact, today still on the Lower East Side, proudly still there. We're so honored and privileged to have Marcia Haddad Ikonomopoulos, Museum Director of Kehila, Kedosha, Janina, and President of the Association of Friends of Greek Jewry, here with us tonight to lead the lecture. One last note I'll make for this evening, and then we'll hand over the floor to Marcia. Two last notes, excuse me. One, we ask that you hold your questions till the end. And if you do have any questions, please enter them in the chat, whether it be technical questions or questions to ask Marcia towards the end of the lecture. And in addition to that, I want to remind everyone, this is all very much a volunteer effort from everyone, and we really need your support. If you're ever interested in sponsoring a series, sponsoring a class specifically, supporting us through other means, donating, we really appreciate that. You can email us at info@, the @ SephardicBrotherhood.com, or conversely, also email museum@kkjsm.org. And we've been happy to inform you about all the potential sponsorship opportunities and other ways to really support us, and we greatly appreciate your support. Now, to hand over the floor to the star of the show tonight, Marcia, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'd like to welcome you all to the third of a 3-part series on Meet Me at the Corner of Broome and Allen. I want to really thank the Sephardic Brotherhood of America, Ethan, Marcus, Andrew Marcus, Marvin Marcus, and the board of Kehila, Kedosha, Janina. And I want to thank all of you who made this possible by sharing with me your family stories and your beautiful photographs. We left off last time with a photo of the Broome and Allen Street Boys. By the way, if any of you want copies of any of these photos, do email me and I would be glad to share them with you. This is your story, your history, your photos. The Broome and Allen Street Fund was founded in 1931 by a group of Sephardic businessmen determined to provide a vacation for hundreds of children who otherwise would not be able to escape the hot and humid summers of New York City. Notice how they say Sephardic businessmen. I would say a good half of the young men in this picture here are Romaniote. But at that time, 1931, the word Romaniote was not even known. All these Jews who were Greek-speaking Jews thought they were Sephardic, as my dear friend Elliot Cochamero once said. He wondered why his family was Sephardic and didn't speak a form of Spanish, and then he found out that they belonged to a very special group called the Romaniotes. It was not until the publication of Ray Dalvin's book that the term was even used. I would like to first of all start off with apology and disclaimer. We have over 25,000 photos in our photo archive and over 150 family trees, plus extensive archival material from Janina. In the first 2 presentations, we tried to include as many families as possible, but now realize that we left some important material out. So to address this, I'm going to show some of those family photos that were not included in the first 2 series. On the plus side, through the first 2 presentations of Meet Me at the Corner of Broome and Allen, our collection of both photos and family trees has increased substantially. Once again, I must thank this amazing community and their generosity. Not only have they continued to share their treasures, but in addition, a number have made generous donations. I am truly humbled to those not included. I'm now going to add some stories. I wasn't humbled by those not included. Okay, let's start off first with the Marcia family. They arrived in 1907. Now we did have this photo, in fact, I think twice. This is a photo that I received not only from members of the Marcia family, but the Kofino family, the Ashkenazi family, simply because many of the people in this photo married into those communities. The Abraham Marcia came over to the United States in 1907 and married Anna Israel in New York in 1911. He was the son of Maya Maza, who fathered 7 children. This tree is the painstaking work of Judith Maza, and we sincerely thank her. The Maza family married into many Yanotzi families, including Ashkenazi, Corfino, Mioni, Israel, and Solomon. Not only were there many children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, but there were some colorful nicknames, my favorite being Drop Belly, which I think is pictured right over here. The Maza family, these are photos. This is Ike and Blanche Maza, Sophie and Esther, Abraham Maza, who was the patriarch of the family line we were talking about, and he's playing a guitar. In the background is his wife, Anna, and then in this picture there's also, Anna was in Israel, and then Mali Yom Tov and Esther Maza. Rivka Abraham arrived in 1909, and Simon Abraham, her youngest son, arrived with his widowed mother and 2 older brothers. The family became part of the Harlem and Bronx communities. Simon's daughter May would marry Zeno Garbalides, and this part over here is May Garbalides, May Abraham Garbalides family. This is one of my favorite photos. This was sent to me by May, and this is David Eliezer Abraham and his father Eliezer Abraham. It was taken in Greece, and you can see the photo mark here of the photographer on this beautiful picture. This is the story of Saul Lafazan's family. Isaac Biro Lafazan arrived April 29th, 1920 in New York. All of his 9 children were born in Greece, 4 with his first wife, Rachel Eliezer, and after her passing, the last 5 with his children with his second wife, Mazalto Malta. Like many Yanoti families, most of his children married into other Yanoti families. The Cohen, the Yohanan, the Addis, the Negrin, the Nachmias, the Yom Tov, and the Confino. His grandson, who's pictured here, Saul Lafazan, with his younger brother Marvin. Saul was one of the creators of the Pashas, along with Louis Kulias. And this is a picture of Saul with his lovely wife, Terry. This is the story of Mac Negrin's family, which is a little bit different. Abraham Negrin, Mac Negrin's father, arrived on June 7th, 1913. He was born in Arta, Greece, a sister community of Janina, but he came to the United States from Alexandria, Egypt in 1913. Abraham's wife was Esther Samuel, and she was born in Trikala and arrived in the USA in 1925 with their oldest son, Jacob. The family was living on Orchard Street in 1930. Max was a true Lower East Sider and loved telling stories of growing up and going to Kedosha Janina. His wife, Tika, and this is their wedding picture here, was from the Benjamin family and grew up right next door to Kehila Kedosha Janina. This is the story of my dear friend Penny Santiago's family. Her grandmother was Sophie Sfolis Mattathias and arrived in 1919. This picture here was taken in Greece, and it is of the Sfolis family, Sophie's family, that she took with her to the United States when she came. Most of the people in this photo perished. The only other member of the Sfolis family to survive were Ebby Sfolis, who passed away a couple of years ago in Janina. And this is Sophie's picture here with her husband, Mattathias, of course, the double name there, and 4 of their 9 children. Actually, I think 4 of their 7 children. Sophie lived many years on Broome Street, and this is the marriage of Sophie's daughter, Becky. She married a Sephardic Jew from the Kamhai family. And this was Sophie Mattathias. These photos here were taken on Broome Street. This is the background, and you can see here what Broome Street looked like that when little Penny was born. And this is a picture here of inside their kitchen. I love the Ajax on the shelf. Thanks to Estelle Negrin Cerno, who sent me photos of Oriole Jacob and then included photos of her family, the Liasco family. And this photos here, this is the Liascos arrived in 1930, and then the Stamula Levy family arrived in 1938. This is a picture of Jules Negrin, 1928. He arrived in 1928, and his wife Esther Liasco in 1930, and this is their wedding, and beautiful wedding photos here. Samuel Menahem and family arrived on July 29, 1930. We saw the story of the Menahem family in the first part of our series, and Samuel was the son of Menahem Moses and Lulu Moses. His name the surname became Menahem when he went to Constantinople, and he came into the United States with the surname of Menahem. And this is his family here. And this ship manifest is fascinating. He arrived in New York City on July 29, 1930. The information on the ship manifest is particularly interesting. His occupation is given as a 52-year-old rabbi. Actually, priest is written down first and then crossed out and replaced with rabbi. His place of birth is listed as Janina, but his place of departure is Istanbul. The closest person left behind is Abraham Abouf in Istanbul, and he's going to Baruch Brothers, is listed as friends at 68 West 18th Street. Actually, the Baruch brothers were family since two of Lulu Moses' daughter married into the Baruch family. This story is very personal. I work with Stuart Chernin, and this is his mother, Stemmer, here, when she arrived in the United States on November 10th, 1938. And this is her with her adopted parents, Morris and Rachel Eliezer. I first remember meeting Stemmer at Yom Kippur services at Kehila Kedosha Janina in 2004, the year we had published the memorial book, In Memory of the Jews of Janina. I went over to introduce myself, and when I heard that her name was Stemmer, said to her, "You must have had many sisters." The name Stemmer usually given to what the family hoped would be the last daughter. Stemmer replied yes, and then told me that her 4 older sisters had perished in the Holocaust. Stemmer had been sent over to live with Rachel and Morris Eliezer. Her parents back home told her that they were her true parents, but Rachel knew that that was not true. Rachel Eliezer was Stemmer's aunt and childless. This act became Stemmer's lifeline because the rest of the family perished in the Holocaust. This is photos that were taken in the interwar period, and these photos show the close connection that the Romano Greek-speaking Jewish community had with the Greek Orthodox world. This photo here was in honor of His Eminence Archbishop Athenagoras, and this was in 1934, I believe. And right next to His Eminence, the Archbishop, is Jasula Levy, the rabbi from Kehila Kedosha Janina. Many of the people in these photos were Greek Jews, and you could not tell the difference between who was a Greek Jew and who was a Greek Orthodox Christian. This photo made the rounds in all the newspapers. When we had the opening of our family exhibit, I presented the then Archbishop Dimitrios with this photograph, and here at the head on the dais, at the bar mitzvah of Erwin Josephs, the son of Joe Josephs, is sitting the Archbishop Athenagoras, and next to him again, Rabbi Jasula Negrin. How many bar mitzvahs have you gone to where the Greek flag is in the background? The next part of this series is going to talk about Greek-Jewish participation in World War II. It's called The Greatest Generation, and the stories that we found from our community certainly points to that. Most of these photos were gathered for a special exhibit called Our Gang. And this photo here was given to us by Ben Jasula and shows here the Broome and Allen Street Boys. This was right in the corner of Broome and Allen. And this was at a rally for World War II on July 22nd, 1942. Here we have part of the rally right in front of Kehila, Kedosha, Janina, and as the speeches were being made. And this here is actually the picture that started it all. This picture is of my girlfriend, Carol Laurie, saluting her uncle, Arthur David Rubenstein, as he goes off to fight in World War II. And that's what gave me the idea. Arthur died in battle, but this picture gave me the idea of doing the Our Gang exhibit. I'm going to have a reading of the names now. It's going to be the honor roll of those that served. I had this grandiose idea of playing World War II music in the background, but Ethan told me it's just not going to happen. Ethan, I don't know if you can see in the gallery, there are two people who are going to take part in this demonstration. So if you can locate them, one is going to be Rose Addis Ferrara, and the other one is going to be Simon Bacola. But let's start with the honor roll call. From the Ashkenazi family, Joe and Jack Ashkenazi served. From the Asa family, David and Manny Asa. Also Jesse, Edward, and Murray, who was also known as Chubby. Hyman Atun was lost in the Pacific on September 15th, 1944. He was shot down. His body was never recovered. He was 24 years old. Hyman's family lived at 299 Broome Street. They were from Trikala, and I owe this story to my friend Louise Roska, who, this was a relative of Louise's. And Louise told me a couple of years ago they actually found the plane and distributed plane parts to surviving relatives of those that perished in that plane. The Addis family had Joseph and Nisim. Ethan, can you find Rose for me? Somewhere?
So Rose, I just asked you to unmute. If you could do that, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay. Rose is, okay. Rose is gonna, I don't know if you can hear me now or if I'm still muted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Rose is going to read a letter that was sent by her uncle Nisim from the battle. He actually died in Belgium at the Battle of the Bulge on January 23rd, 1945. He was born in the Lower East Side, the son of Esther and Chaim Addis. He was a private in the 230th Field Artillery Battalion, 30th Infantry Division, and he was a radio operator and 20 years old when he died. Rose, can you read that letter, please?
Can you hear me?
Certainly, yeah.
You can hear me. Okay, first I never saw my grandmother's name written as Esther. Her name was Stamula.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what my uncle Nissim wrote, and there was a third brother, Morris Attis. And so Nissim is writing this letter to Morris, and it's headed somewhere in Belgium, January 4th, 1945. Dear Morris, received your letter yesterday and was very glad to hear from you. How are you, Morris? I'm feeling fine. Glad you liked my picture. What outfit were you with when you were in Italy? Glad to hear everything at home is fine. I heard from Myra Mione, Eddie Eskenazi the younger, and my very good friend Charlie. How's Charlie? He tells me he got the Purple Heart. I know one thing, Morris, they can have all the medals, Purple Hearts, and everything else. All I want to know is that I am coming home safely when this lousy war is over. I observe the Hanukkah holiday by attending services. Well, Morris, that's about all for now. Don't forget to tell Mom that you heard from me, and also all my love to Mom, Pop, Sarah, Marty, Eddie, and everyone else. Write soon. Your brother Nissim. I just wanted to say that Nissim was awarded the Silver Star and the Purple Heart, but really he just wanted to get home. And so thank you, Marcia, for doing this for us. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Rose, for all that you've done in helping us with stories from your family. I'm going to need now Simon Bacola. So if you can mute Rose and unmute Simon.
Simon, I ask you to unmute yourself. So if you could do that, that'd be great.
Okay. Okay, if I can just say very briefly as an introduction, Simon Bacola's nephew, Simon Bacola, died on January 16th, 1945 in France. The family chose to bring his body home to the United States, and he's buried in Pine Lawn. And I make a point of trying to visit the cemetery because his uncle lives out in California now, but the family tries to visit him as often as possible. And Simon, I believe you're going to read something about the awards that your uncle received.
Okay, I'm going to read the citation that he received for the Silver Star, received from the President of the United States for gallantry in action on December 10th, 1944 in the vicinity of, we don't have the exact location, Company A, 17th Armored Infantry Battalion was under our artillery, mortar, and machine gun fire. While his platoon was pinned down by the fire of 8 machine guns, Private Bacola left his cover and without regard for his own safety, crawled to wounded men and administered first aid. After applying first aid, Private Bacola directed one of the wounded men at the rear and then crawled back to the cover, pulling another with him. Private Bacola's courage and devotion and his comrade exemplify the highest standards of military service. That was for the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. He also won the Oak Leaf Cluster and the State of New York Medal. And another episode on, if you forgive me 1 second, I'm going to read this off the phone. This was awarded on January 16th, his date of death, 1945, for the Oak Leaf Cluster. In gallantry in action, January 16th, 1945, in the vicinity of, they don't know, when the remainder of his platoon, it's hard to read because it's a very old document, the remainder of his platoon was pinned down by mortar, machine gun, and rifle fire, Private Bacola, first class Private Bacola, left comparative safety of his foxhole and made his way to the aid of his, I can hardly read this, his platoon leader. There, Private First Class Bacola administered first aid to the wounded man who was later evacuated. Private First Class Bacola was last seen rendering aid to his friend. His outstanding courage and devotion for his comrade reflect the finest traditions of military service.
Thank you, Simon, so much for sharing that with us. Thank you. Okay, to continue with the Call of Honor, this is actually Hi Baruch was visiting his cousin Ed Bacola on leave in Los Angeles. In the Baruch family, we honor Hi, Marvin, and Saul. In the Bacino family, Abraham, Manny, and of course our Ralph Bacino, one of the humblest men that I've ever met. He's a blessed memory now. He died just shortly before his 100th birthday. Joe Califf and Irving Cofino. Vic Cabelli and Philip Kamai. The wedding of Danny Chamo and Annette Levy, and you can see how many of the men were in uniform. Mo Cofino and Ralph Cofina. Back in Greece, this was the same name, by the way. The Cohn family, Isaac, Jack, Jacob, and Joe. The Levies, Isaac, Joseph, and Manny Levy. And this is one of my favorite pictures, a little bit of levity. This is Louis Levy meeting Benny Cohn overseas and them greeting each other, 2 boys from the Lower East Side. This is from the Colchamaro family, John Justin and Leon Asa Colchamaro, Murray Corito, Arthur David Rubenstein, who we talked about at the very beginning. His plane was shot down in the Pacific and his body was never recovered. Hai Eliasov and Isaac Franco. From the Ganesh family, Jesse, Leo, and Milton, and Sam Ganesh. From the Jani family, Abe and Hai, Ben Jasula. From the Eskenazi family, Murray and Sam. From the Hametz family. Now, mind you, these three brothers were recent immigrants that came over in 1928 with their father, Israel Hametz, and all three served overseas in the United States Armed Forces during World War II. This is Albert, Isaac, and Ovadia. This is Morris and Jack Jacobs. Judah, Jack and Morris. Jack Kaplan and Joseph Lafazan. A number of years ago, I wrote a story for the Greek National Herald called The Personal Odyssey of Louis Levy. This was after Louis's daughter, Rhonda, found papers talking about a personal odyssey of Louis, having promised his mother that if he landed anywhere near Greece, he would make his way to Janina. His family back on the Lower East Side had not heard anything from their relatives in Janina. Louis ship docked in Patras in the spring of 1945. He jumped ship, risking court-martial, and made his way to Janina, hitching rides from British soldiers. What he found was a city almost empty of its Jews. Only a few who had returned from hiding in the mountains, some fighting with the resistance, and rumors of the complete destruction of the community. Louis' story is archived at Kedosha Janina. We thank his daughter, Rhonda Paganetti, for unearthing the story buried in a dresser drawer. This is a picture of Louis Levy and his first wife, Shirley Cabelli Paganetti. Matsu and Mac Marshall here. This is Abraham Matsu. Died on January 6, 1945 at the Battle of the Bulge. When we went to Andre Chapelle Military Cemetery in Belgium, we were joined by Jaime Longoria, who had shared with me the story of how Abraham had saved his father in battle. He actually was related to Rose Adders also, and this is Bob Cunning, who has a bed and breakfast in the Ardennes there, who did so much research on the Battle of the Bulge and was actually able to bring us to the spots where both Abraham had died in battle and where Nissim had also died. It was one of the most moving experiences of my life. By the way, the Belgian people are fantastic. They adopt graves in the cemetery of American soldiers so that they could honor them either on the day that they fell in battle or on their birthdays. And we actually met the family that had adopted Nissim, and they treated us like royalty. Well, actually, we owed them so much. Other Matsus who fought, Aaron, Hai, Jesse, and Ralph. Michael Menachem and Menachem Naftali. Michael Menachem was in that picture of the Menachem family coming over in 1930, and then he went on to fight in World War II. This is from the Maza family. This is Ike Maza, and this is actually the registration from Maya Maza. This is Maya Mioni. Max Mordecai, Max Moses, and Martin Mussey. Martin Mussey grew up on the Lower East Side, and he lived over on Delancey Street, in fact. The Mionis family, Dave, Hai, and Mo. Nat Mionis and Marco Mionis. Herbert Nachman. Herbert Nachman was a flight officer and was killed in action on a mission over Germany on December 30th, 1944. Herbert was 20. His mother, Ray Nachman, was president of the Sisterhood when he died. Family chose to bring his remains home, and he's buried in Greenwood. Nachmias, Isaac, known as Pat and Nathan. Isaac was a prisoner of war in World War II. The Nachmias family lived at 279 Broome Street. Negrin, this is Herman, Milton, and Morris. Max Negrin and Sam Negrin with his bride. This is Diana Ganis. Joseph Saber and Gabrielle Sabat. I love what's written on here. I don't know if you can make it out, but this was a cannon, from a cannon. This was I don't know the military term that's used, but this was what would be fired at the Germans, and it was signed by members of the Zega family and other members in the battalion. Solomon, Murray Samuel, and Solomon. Rebecca Moses Farone also served in the U.S. Armed Forces. Maya Yumtov, Eli Zager, and this is when Eli proposed to be Saba in Central Park. And this was the corner of Broome and Allen as the rally for World War II ended. This is an interesting photo because this took place in actually 1944 when the war was still going on, and this was an honorary dinner for Joseph Besso. Now about the survivors. This is the last part of our presentation, talking about those that came over after World War II and became part of our community in New York. This is the Gabrielidis family, the family of Zeno Gabrielidis, and he and his sister survived along with his mother. His father, Michael, perished in the camps. And this is a picture of Michael Gabrielidis with the whole family here and the grandmother. And this is Zeno and his sister with his father, Michael. The family of Memos Bacalaias arrived in 1951, a similar story where some members of the family were in hiding with Greek Christians, and other members of the family perished in the camps. The family of Esther Politis Mordecai and Elias Mordecai came in 1951. This is also a story that became very personal since Esther, her daughter Evelyn, became a good friend. This is Esther in the picture here. Most of her family perished in the camps. She married another survivor, Elias Mordecai. They came over in 1951, and they actually went to North Carolina to become part of the community there. This is another one of my favorite photos. These are 4 women in Janina who survived the concentration camps and the first babies that were born. And this is actually Evelyn, or Tula Mordecai, with her mother, Esther. And these are more recent pictures of Evelyn Mordecai with her sister and her mother and her father. And this is when she was a little baby. Another member of Evelyn's family was Margarita Politis. Her mother was from the Politis family, Matza and Nahum Matza, and they arrived in 1951. Oreo Jacobs arrived in 1951, and he became one of the most beloved members of our community in New York. This is his family before the war. This was his first wife, who died in the camps with their baby girl, who was a year old. Oreo lost so much, but he never lost his sweet, gentle nature. And this is with his second wife. And this is Oreo with his girls. And among those girls is Esther Gabrielidis and Estelle Negrin-Acerno. The Amali family, or the family of my volunteer, Stella Bacolis, arrived in 1951. And these are members of the family back in Greece. Yamali was actually Moses in Greece, but it was a nickname. And it meant someone without hair, and supposedly someone in the family had gone into the army and had their hair shaven, and that became the family name. And here's Albert and Mike Yamali. Many will remember Mike at all the Pashar events, balancing a glass of ouzo on his head while he danced. This is a great picture. I wish they hadn't cut off the top of their heads with it. This is Jesse Bacola, Morris Bacola, who became Stella Yamali's husband, Elias Hazi, and Ari Negrin. They came over in 1955 and 56. And here is the wedding of Cookie and Elias Hazi. And Elias continues to serve our community. He makes up part of our minyan and often volunteers in the museum. The family of Moses and Esther Negrin came over after the 1955 earthquake in Volos, and here you can see them being sheltered after the earthquake. This is when Hayas brought over in 1955 many Greek Jews, where earlier in 1951, most of those were brought over by the Joint. The Akos family came over in 1951 and were sent to St. Paul, Minnesota, but a member of that family, Mark Winthrop, is on our board of trustees from Kehila Kedosha Yanada. The family, Rosa and 5 of her children, owe their salvation to a woman by the name of Hadaklia Sayanu, and the association was instrumental in having them honored at Yad Vashem. Last December, I think it was, we went to Greece with the 2 Marks cousins, both sons of Rosa's daughters and their children. And here is Hadaklia Sayanu's daughter here, who treated us at her home. Very moving event for the children. And it was something they'll never forget. In the synagogue in Athens, the same synagogue where Menachem Akos was taken by the Germans, Simon had got up and made an aliyah in the synagogue, along with Mark Winthrop's son, also went up and made an aliyah there. The family of Abraham and Esther Batino came over in 1955, brought over by Hayas. Again, the same story where the family was saved by Greek Orthodox Christians in Greece. Saul Kofinas, who anyone who has ever come into our synagogue knows, he arrived in 1955. They sent him to Massachusetts first, which Saul absolutely hated, so he made his way to the Lower East Side. This is the family back in Greece, and only his grandmother in this picture survived. Saul and his brother Zeno, Saul was about 6 years old at the time, Zeno was 7 years older than him, and they survived due to the Haji family. Part of the members came from Canada on a Yom HaShoah not too long ago, very emotional Yom HaShoah. And the boys were fed during the day by the father of the Hashi family who had a restaurant. And then they would sleep at night in a cellar, but survived the war that way. Kula Cohn's family came in 1956. She married Saul Kofinas, and they still live on the Lower East Side. This is Kula, Rachel, and Saul. And both Kula and Saul Kofinas have dedicated themselves to preserving the synagogue and telling the stories of Greek Jews on the Lower East Side. The Beskes arrived in 1956, and I don't know if you remember this photo from one of the first presentations. This is Eva Eliezer, who, at her engagement to Morris Gabelis, sent a photo back to Greece, and her family photoshopped her into the photo. Well, the only other person in this picture who survived was Sam. The family name became Beska. According to oral history, this was when, I believe it was Metaxas, decided that you couldn't have double names, which practically every Jewish family in Janina had. So Eliezer became a Beska. This is Sam here with his wife, and we don't know who this man is here, but this is when he was forced to serve in the Greek army during the Civil War. Here he had just gotten out of a concentration camp, and he's going to fight for a cause that he probably didn't believe in at all. The Sisterhood of Janina is a very vital part of our community. It was founded in 1932 by Leon Cochimero, and this is a photo that was taken from, I believe, the 1970s or 80s, and this, of course, is Rose Eskenazi, who is the president of the Sisterhood now. Another organization that was founded was the Pashas in 1957. This is part of a very large picture, and this is the other part of that picture. I had visions of playing Samyotisa in the background while I was showing these pictures, but Ethan told me it wasn't going to work. So if you can hum Samyotisa to yourself, I'll put on some. This is former presidents of the Pashas. Some joyous moments. This is down in Florida. And this is Max Marshall and Hai Eliasov. And this, of course, is some of our favorite people here, dancing, including Ralph Batino, Sam Nachmias, and Saul Matzo. And again, constantly the dancing. At the end of every Pasha gathering, there would be handkerchiefs going and women getting up on the table and dancing. Unfortunately, the Pashas is now disbanded. We miss them greatly. It was a social organization with no other purpose but keeping alive the traditions and customs of Greek Jews. I'm ending now. I'm going to open the floor to questions, Ethan.
Yeah, absolutely. Just
Okay.
a reminder to everyone, if you have a question, please type it into the chat box and we'll read it out and get to it as many as we can. Marcia, just to open up, the first question. First of all, Hazaka Baruchai, beautiful lecture in the three-part series. It's really wonderful to see all our collective history and culture and all our family members really in this series. I wanted to ask a question that's often popped up in conversations with different community members, is how can we make sure that these identities, these community leaders, these memories, that they don't disappear, that they survive, and that they really thrive in our Roman Yod community?
You have to pass them on to the next generation. I often say when I have people come in, when you have the holidays and you're shoving food into their mouths, shove some of the history and the culture, make them proud of who they are and where they came from, because they have a very, very special culture. We were very fortunate to have people who loved who they were, who founded the synagogue, and who passed that on to their children, and then passed them on to the next generation. It's now our responsibility to do the same. It's really not hard. Talk about it. Sometimes your kids won't be paying attention, sometimes they will. But a little bit, especially with the food, I mean, let's face it, we have great food. So give it to them with the food, pass it on, and keep it going.
First question here from the chat. Does KKJ still have friendly relations with the Greek Orthodox Church?
Yes, definitely. In fact, I was just on the phone with Father Alex, who acts as a liaison with Archbishop Epiphanes, and we actually had a private meeting with His Eminence, the Archbishop, when he came shortly after he arrived in the United States. Marvin Marcus and myself, we had a sit down that lasted probably close to 2 hours. He was just such a pleasure to talk to. And Father Alex acts as a liaison. We often discuss what we share in common, and we have excellent relations. We have excellent relations with the Greek Orthodox Church. We have excellent relations with the Greek Consulate and the Greek Embassy in Washington, D.C.
Another question here. How did a lot of last names get created? Because we see a lot of names that weren't necessarily last names when they lived in Greece, but later were changed over time.
Okay, most of the last names or the surnames of Jews from Janina are male Hebrew first names that became surnames. Other names are Hellenized, or some of them are occupational names. There was you take the name Batinos. Batinos was someone who stuffed quilts. Kofanas was someone who made little baskets. You had Colchomero, of course, was a nickname given to someone who was so picky in picking out his fabrics. So names came about, but surnames amongst Greek Jews were early on because the thing is what went crazy, the Turks went crazy with the way the Jews were naming their children. Because if Samuel had a son named Solomon, Solomon would name his first son Samuel. And the Turks thought they were changing the surname constantly, but actually they weren't. They were naming their children the way way Jews always do. And Greek Jews will name their children after their fathers and mothers, honoring their parents. They still continue to do this. And sometimes it becomes a problem when you marry out of the Greek, Jewish, or Sephardic world. And among the Ashkenazim, they think it's bad luck to name after someone who's living. We feel that it's an honor. Next question.
Another question here. Does KKJ have any materials for sale or work it's done specifically on the Romanov Jews who served in World War II?
No, we don't. That nothing has ever been published on that. We have, of course, the photos, these stories here. I certainly, if you see any of your family members, I'd be glad to share any of these, but nothing was ever published on that. There are so many things that should be done, and the thing is to find the time to do them and the interest of people who want to sponsor some of these projects. Next question.
One note from here, from speaking with Andrew Marcus right now, also who with my father Marvin produced the Romanov in World War II video.
Right.
And we're actually working right now to digitize those interviews and hopefully get them up on YouTube soon enough, so that way we can access some of those interviews from our wonderful war veterans from the Romanov community on the Lower East Side. Another question. Oh, sorry.
Ethan, that's going to actually make it off your father's camera?
Little by little, we'll get there.
Little by little. Okay, good.
Another question here. People in the photos seem fairly secularized. Is that an accurate description? Can you comment on the degree which religious traditions were observed in pre-World War II Janina and then after the Yanoti Jews came to the United States?
Okay, let me preface this by saying there was never a reform movement amongst Greek Jews, either Romanov or Sephardic. Conservative Judaism is something that was initiated in the United States. And so technically all Greek Jews are Orthodox Jews. Please don't get exalted, but I like to describe their orthodoxy as less neurotic orthodoxy. They observed kashrut for the most part. They observed, very rarely in Greece did they observe the Shabbat, especially after it became where Sunday was a holiday and it became difficult to leave your business for 2 days. Coming here to the United States, they again observed their religion, their form of their religion, their form of orthodoxy. And they were very committed to who they were, both as Greeks and as Jews, and as hoping to become Americans. These practices are, I find with families, that there were different segments. There were those that became ultra-Orthodox amongst the Greek Jewish community. There are those that became more relaxed Orthodox. There are those that became Reform. There are those that married out into the non-Romanov world, into either the Sephardim or the Ashkenazim. And then there were those that married into the Christian world, basically the same as the rest of Judaism within the United States. In this country, we have the freedom to practice our Judaism however we see fit. There are some Jews that only consider their Judaism in philanthropic ways, and that's how they express being Jewish. So where this was never the case in the old world, it's now the case in the new world.
Another question here regarding the name Maza. Given that the Maza, Matzah, and Matzas, all very similar names, seem to be very similar, do you think that they were able to go back enough, far enough back for the generations that these variations were all from the same family line?
Okay, Maza is a definite variation on matzah. And if you look how the word pizza is pronounced, as if there was a T there, you can understand how maza became matzah. There's all kinds of speculation where the origin of the name is. Did it arrive from Italy? And certainly those that spell it M-A-Z-Z-A certainly have an Italian connection there. But It's probably has something to do with the production of matzot. And there were certainly families within Yana that were involved in that production. We're not quite sure. We probably never will know, but we can just celebrate the matzahs and the mazas as they are. There's actually a very famous maza. I forgot his name offhand, but when it comes back to me, I'll let you know. Okay. He was a comedian, by the way.
Let's see, one or two more questions here. Do genetic testing sites know or recognize Romaniote as a group within their DNA testing?
Sure. We have a whole DNA database that has been initiated by Barry Meones, Adam Brown, and Jonathan Alcantara. And we've collected extensive DNA testing along those lines. And it's made connections in many instances. For instance, I was looking for information about Rebecca Bacola from England. And so we had her grandson, Alex, tested. I also had Simon Bacola tested. I'm trying to get as much Bacola into the database there to see if we can find any connection. Bacola was probably a nickname also. And not all the Bacola families were definitely related to each other. They seem to come primarily from a part of Greece that's not necessarily Ioannina. It's called Philiakis, and it's on the border between Albania, what is now Albania, and Greece. And, but, you know, so many of these small communities, everybody was related somehow, maybe not first or second cousins, but somewhere down the line. We have an excellent database of Romaniote Jews, and if any of you are interested in getting your DNA into that, get in touch with me, please.
Another question here. Can you discuss how the Ashkenazis made their way to Greece from Eastern Europe? And, where the majority of the Ashkenazim came from with the last name Ashkenazi?
Okay, excellent question. Not that the other questions were not excellent, but this is a particularly excellent question. Okay. As you pointed out by your question, your knowledge of knowing that Ashkenazi means, it originally meant Jews that came from German lands. And there was an influx of Ashkenazim coming from German lands down into Greece, going back in the actually 14th century, at the time that it was Byzantium. It continued into the time of the Ottoman Turkish Empire. And we found Ashkenazi Jews coming in Salonika. There was a synagogue there that was an Ashkenazi synagogue that the Salonicans called La Sinagoga de los Locos. And there was Ashkenazim that came into Turkey in the Ottoman Turkish Empire, and definitely Ashkenazim that came down into Ioannina. And when we did the DNA test, it was no surprise that there was Ashkenazi DNA that showed up in many of these people. There was also another influx from Russia during the time of the pogroms into Salonika. I have a friend of mine whose last name is Moskovitz, and who is a Salonika Jew, and his family dates back to the 1880s when there was this influx of Jews fleeing the pogroms in Russia into lands where life was easier. Are you still with me, Ethan?
I am indeed. Sorry, just fixing one thing. So I think with that, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. There was a logistical question about whether or not, if you missed a previous lecture in the series, we had 2 previous lectures the past 2 Mondays. I'm going to post the link right now into the chat. So you can see, if you open up your chat, a link to our Facebook video, links on the Sephardic Brothers page where you can find all our videos from the previous classes. And also, there's an additional link there. We'd ask a big favor from you. If you can click on that link, is for a Google form. We ask you to take a quick 5-minute survey to give us some feedback about what you've thought about this wonderful 3-part series with Marcia, so we can help improve and make sure we can provide more wonderful content through the Sephardic Digital Academy and KKJ that you really like to hear and like to see. And we really appreciate any inputs you can give. And lastly, I'll lead off with this, that to reminder, this is a nonprofit initiative. This is only through the help of people like Marcia and the Sephardic Jewish Brotherhood of America and Kehila, Kedosha, Janina, all of which need your support, especially now more than ever well, with everything going on. We would appreciate any support you could give us at any time. If you're interested in supporting us, interested in sponsoring a series, please reach out to us. You can email us at info@sephardicbrotherhood.com, as well as at museum@kkjsm.org. And I'll also type those both into the chat at this moment. I want to thank Marcia again so much for this wonderful three-part series. We've had so much praise from everyone. If you're interested in seeing more, please take that poll. Please email Marcia, tell her you want to see more. We can always use support in nudging Marcia a little bit forward, and I'm sure she'd love to provide one, God willing, soon enough. So thank you again, Marcia.
Thank you, Ethan. You always make me look good. Thank you so much.
You do that yourself, Marcia, don't worry. So thank you all so much once again. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope to hear from you in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.